Imagine you're a business owner relying on a dozen different software programs. Each one is expensive, overly complicated, and worst of all, none of them are connected. It can be incredibly stressful, right? Now, picture Odoo. CRM, accounting, inventory, manufacturing, marketing, HR, and more. Odoo brings all the tools your business needs into one simple platform, and all seamlessly connected. Everything works together, giving you the peace of mind that your business is running smoothly from every angle. Odoo's open-source applications are user-friendly and designed to scale with your business, saving you time and money. Say goodbye to juggling multiple platforms and hello to efficient integrated management. Stop wasting resources on complicated systems and make the switch to Odoo today. Visit odoo.com, ODOO.com, and discover how Odoo can simplify and streamline your business operations. Odoo, modern management made simple.
I'm Kourtney Smith.
And I'm Elyse Sharp.
And we are two nerds who are here to make Shakespeare easier to understand.
In this podcast, we will explore as many dimensions to Shakespeare's plays as we can by looking at the text, examining the historical context in which the plays were written, and how his plays are viewed through modern lenses of feminism, racism, classism, colonialism, nationalism, ableism, all of the isms.
We will discuss how his plays shaped both the past and present, and, as theater makers, how his plays can be responsibly performed today, all while trying our best to approach his works without giving in to bardolatry.
So, Shakespeare anyone?
Hi, listeners. Want to support Shakespeare Anyone? Visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. Now, onto the episode.
Hi, Kourtney.
Hi, Elyse.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I've been fending off a little, headache all day just because it's raining and I love it, but sometimes that triggers a little headache for me.
Yeah, I hope that you have something around that helps you. You got maybe some tea, some water. Maybe you've got your copy of Henry V and the Tempest.
Yes, exactly. Those are so helpful. Yeah, but today, as you mentioned, we are doing our annual revisit where we look back at the plays that we have read and studied this year. We reread them and we think about what would we do differently now, or what do we want to see in the future? How has spending 6 months on each of the plays and looking at them in depth, how has that changed our understandings of the play and what stood out to us on these reads versus when we've read them to write the summary?
Yeah, it's always exciting to see what stood out, what's changed due to either of our research. And then also sometimes there are things that we don't get to because there's only so much space within a season. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about all of those things.
Right. But before we get into that, we have just a little housekeeping. We know that it is a season where people love to give gifts. And we just want to let everybody know that if you have anyone who's going, oh, what do I get that Shakespeare nerd in my life? We do have some merch. We just last month launched a new beanie that is great for colder climates. And we have some fun drinkware, cozy sweatshirts and shirts. I'm actually wearing my Shakespeare Anyone shirt right now on our store at shakespeareanyone.com/shop. And there are some printing deadlines, so we recommend, especially for our listeners in the US, if you are interested in getting or receiving some Shakespeare Anyone merch, getting those orders in before December 11th for standard shipping and before December 14th for express shipping, just to make sure that they arrive before the end of the month. We also have gift guides on our bookshop.org storefront if you are in the mood for more books or board games. And our partners at bookshop.org and libro.fm tend to have some great discounts and deals this time of year. So be sure to check those out in the link in our bio for the most up-to-date links and best deals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I also want to highlight to Elyse, you said that we have a new beanie in our storefront.
Yes.
But I also want to highlight how cool this beanie is. So we don't just have a beanie. It is a Charlie XCX Brat green. And on the beanie, it says Bard instead of Brat. So that's the level of creativity and relevance that this podcast brings to your Christmas gifts for your Shakespeare fans for the holidays.
Thank you. I love that we get to design merch that we wish was out there, or merch that maybe comes to us in a fever dream in the middle of summer.
Yes.
And that we cannot launch until winter because the only thing in the right color is a beanie. As a quick anecdote, I was on the phone with a family member who participates in a drunk Shakespeare. They and their friends get together and read a play with a drinking game. And they were like, "Oh, you have drinkware. I need to get this as gifts. I didn't know you did drinkware." And I was like, yeah.
Why would we not?
Why would we not? We love putting quotes on things that are not the typical quotes that are done 1,000 different ways on Etsy. So when you shop our store, you are directly supporting the podcast and showing off your love of Shakespeare and the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, and one last piece of housekeeping. Just so you know, all of our merch on our website is 15% off for the rest of the month of December. You don't need a code. Just head to shakespeareanyone.com/shop, add things to your cart, and the discount should automatically apply at checkout. But yeah, enough about our merch.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Henry V, even though we do have a pint glass that has a Prince Hal line on it.
So now we're done talking about our merch.
Now we're done talking about our merch. Let's talk about our revisiting and talk about, first up, our first play of the year was Henry V.
Yeah, it was really fun to reread Henry V, mostly because actually prior to our engagement at the beginning of the year choosing Henry V, I'd only read Henry V once before for university, and I'd only seen it once. I saw the Globes with Jamie Parker, and so it was really fun to go back after us really excavating this particular play and seeing what stood out. I think one thing throughout, like top to bottom of what really stood out to me from our research was just how important it is to make Henry likable.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that at the beginning of the play, there are lines by Canterbury and Ely about how Prince Hal basically is no more. After Hal's dad passes, the previous king, Henry IV, dies, he changes and we see this new Henry.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that was really effective from our viewings was seeing Henrys that even though they're technically, it's a new man, in order for me to root for this guy who's choosing to send his subjects to war in France over a claim to the throne, I want to like him.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that he not only has to be likable, he has to be not brooding. And I think Canterbury and Ely's what they say about him is just he has grace and he has all of the manners becoming of a king. And you would never have guessed it by how rude and raucous he was. And it's actually interesting because I know we haven't talked about Henry IV, but when we first meet Prince Hal, the guy who's shirking all of his responsibilities, he gives a direct address to the audience that is this isn't who I actually am. I'm playing at this because it's going to make a great redemption story. And I actually, I do know what it takes to be king. I am going to be a great king, but I'm going to be an even better king if people think that I had a redemption arc. And I think that keeping that guy in mind, the guy who has always known he's capable, knows how to have a good time, though, is kind of where Henry lives to me. And I think it's, especially in productions that we saw, there was a tendency to try and reconcile the Hal of Henry IV's to the Henry of Henry V. And if you don't pay attention to that first monologue, then it feels like such a different person, but it's the same person. In Henry V, we see winks of that person so that the pranks, because the glove prank can be hilarious if well done, or it can be awful if Henry's too serious.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think it also helps to have that Prince Hal alive so that even before that, the conversations that he has with Williams and Bates when he's pretending to be a common soldier makes sense. Like, this is a man who used to go out amongst common folk.
He used to do highway robbery with friends as a joke.
Yeah.
He wouldn't do the highway robbery, but what he would do is rob the friends that he set up to do a highway robbery, because that would be hilarious.
He's so funny.
Again, like, he loves a prank, and he always has, always will.
Yeah. Yeah. What were some things that stood out to you or things that you want to know more about?
Yeah, something that I've reflected on, and it kind of happened before I reread this, and then in rereading it, I was like, oh, right, I had that moment this past summer. I was teaching a Shakespeare class to actors, and I just happened to pull the first chorus speech in Act 3, Scene 1 from A Midsummer Night's Dream to talk about what we know about theater in Shakespeare's time. And they were such good comparisons, because in Henry V's chorus, we see how Shakespeare solves for the limitations of theater, just asking the audience to amend those limits with their imagination.
Right.
And when you compare that directly to the mechanicals going, how do we get a moon in the chamber? Oh, like, will you open up a window? And they're so literal about it. I think, one, it helps illuminate why the mechanicals are funny in that moment. They are trying to be so literal, and those two pieces of text are really interesting to look at side by side. Any teachers out there want to steal that, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense too, because the chorus for Henry V is like Shakespeare literally talking to his audience, and then Midsummer is making fun of
them trying to solve the same problems in a way that, like, doesn't make sense, actually, is bad theater.
Yeah, in ways that makes me think, like, were there theaters that were overcomplicating production during Shakespeare's time? You know, is that something that he was seeing?
Yeah.
That would make him go, well, let's make fun of this because so-and-so at, like, the Rose or the, you know, Newington Butts was, you know, overcomplicating this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that has stood out to me ever since. That wasn't there when we read it initially.
That's a really cool discovery.
I think also something that I want to see more of related to this is sparse Henry V's. Like, technically sparse Henry V's. I think that we found this in our wrap-up episode of, like, it's really weird to say, when we say horses, imagine them, and then to actually see horses try to be made. This play works really well, and it seems to be intentionally written to be technically a sparse play and done very bare bones. And then my final takeaway with it was, I think the histories, sometimes people get the impression that they are harder to understand than the tragedies or the comedies, or that you need to know British history in order to enjoy them. And what I have learned is that no, if they didn't have the historical figure attached to them, they would be comedies or tragedies, you know. I think that it being a history can sometimes get into people's head. I know it got into mine for a long time, and I did not read histories because I just thought, oh, well, those are going to be dry or those are going to be boring in comparison. And they're still, like, beautiful human stories that just happen to be including historical figures. Yeah.
I also avoided histories for a very long time. Then you find out, wow, there's all of this comedy that exists. Similar to reading, you mentioned Midsummer. Just like Midsummer, there's the mechanicals in Midsummer, and then there's the Eastcheap Company, and then also I was thinking of the leak scene, which is so funny if it's done so well. And so it's just that there's this hang up because of the genre that it has been assigned. When really it's like historical...
It's historical fiction.
Yeah.
Great. It was really fun to revisit this one. I know it felt like such a big leap for us because, again, histories felt intimidating, but I'm really excited to dive into more histories in any order that we want to, because they do, like, stand alone. And with that, let's dive into our next play, The Tempest.
Perfect. So we literally just wrapped up The Tempest. We just released our wrap-up.
It's very fresh.
And so one of the things that is central in my mind is where the post-colonial, decolonial lives within this play. I mean, we discussed in our series how colonialism has been tied to this play to some capacity, like a proto discussion, like the seeds of studying this play through the lens of post-colonial theory or anything decolonial. But after seeing the Globe's production, I am thinking a lot about how, like, if you're not going to place a conversation about colonialism into the play, it feels like what the Globe did, which was separate it.
A-colonial?
Yeah.
Just completely, this does not exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So unless you're ready to really address how much it's like, just distance the play, because otherwise it feels weird to be producing this play without that kind of nuance, you know?
Yeah, it feels very weird for, I think I'm going to say what you're sort of going around. It is weird and dated to cast Caliban as the only person of color in the cast. It is also weird and dated to cast Caliban and Ariel as the only persons of color in The Tempest. So do better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, one, there are other ways to engage with a decolonial lens with this play.
Yeah. I will say an asterisk is, unless you like truly are going to really interrogate the text, and sometimes that could mean, like, for example, making Prospero less reliable of a narrator, making Miranda less reliable as a narrator, and questioning why these characters get away with some of their attitudes towards Caliban. If you're, as you're saying, Elyse, if the only actors of color are those roles.
Yeah. If you are doing that, you are reinforcing the colonial narratives that exist in this play. So find another way. Or do what the Globe did and think about the play outside of the colonial context. And how can you do that?
Yes.
My takeaway from our experience with The Tempest is, in contrast to Henry V, which I just said is like, this works with like minimal set, minimal costumes, minimal everything. I think Tempest, we sort of talked about this in our wrap-up, works more with maximalism. And this sort of, I think, also tells us, when we think about production history, you know, The Tempest was likely performed indoors with more special effects during Shakespeare's time. So it was likely a more maximalist production. And it directly references court masks, which were the most maximalist productions.
Yeah.
So I think it is inherently something of a spectacle. And I've seen many Tempests in my personal history with this play that lean more towards the minimalism. And I think that it would be exciting to see more big budget Tempests.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially because this play intentionally mentions magic. So what kind of effects can you use? There's also the matter of, like you mentioned, this was likely performed indoors at the Blackfriars. And so there's this scholarship to suggest that the costuming would have been designed in a way that, like,
Reflected
there
candlelight.
would have been beautiful reflective candlelight. Yeah. So there's like all of this beauty too, in addition to the masks. And then also there's all this music. Like, this is a spectacle. Make it spectacular.
Yeah.
One thing I wish that we could investigate more, specifically going off of this idea of like the music, is early modern music. I actually am like, wow, we've talked a little bit about music in Twelfth Night. We've talked about jigs a little bit, court masks. We know that there's music that's discussed in The Noises of the Island. And one thing I'd like to keep looking into is early modern music. And because that's something I don't know much about.
Sounds like a mini episode.
Ooh.
I'm really happy with what we were able to accomplish with this season as well, because for me, it actually answered a lot of questions that have come up when I or friends have done The Tempest, of like, I feel like we found some really great answers and potentially solutions for people, or things to consider. How does Prospero's magic work? What do you have to consider when you make Prospero Prospera? And also, like, the legacy of Caliban, like, who is Caliban? So I'm really happy. I think if we had time, I would have loved to, like, try and figure out a little bit more of is, like, Sycorax in all of it, because I think that Sycorax is this word that we hear so often, and I think that her presence is very felt, and, like, being able to spend a little bit more time looking into Algiers, what the language of Sycorax tells us, and also what it would have meant in the early modern period.
I also am like, Sycorax. That's like a gap that would be nice to have had more time to really look into, because Caliban gave us a peek into Sycorax and also Ariel. We don't know, we didn't study Ariel as much as maybe we could have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that sticking with some of those other figures, since this play is so, has so many individual characters that you could just really dive into the richness of characters in this play.
Yeah, I agree. It's also, there's an interesting thing. When I did this play a few years ago, the production team and I were talking of like, it's so weird that we don't see the scene where Ariel leads Stefano Trinculo and Caliban into like the muck and mire and everything that's going on like behind the court mask, that plot.
Yeah.
And seeing like if there's any sort of scholarship out there about like, does anyone else feel like that scene is just missing? You know?
Yeah, because we don't see from point A to point B, because Ariel is a spirit that's manipulating the mask.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like the clowns are near them, or in the muck. Yeah.
Yeah. We hear it reported to us in a way that like, it feels like something that like Puck would report to Oberon. But when Puck reports to Oberon, we see everything that Puck tells Oberon. So we know that Puck is telling the truth. In other plays, when somebody is like, oh yes, like here's what happened, we have often seen what's happened. And this is one where we don't get that. I'm like, I wonder if there's any sort of other people wondering about that scene we hear about but don't see.
Yeah. Is it a scene that the collectors of the folio didn't find, and so it's not in there? No one was able to recount it. Or is it something that Shakespeare
or was it just always intentionally this like Greek action from the ancient Greek theater practices of describing action that happened off stage that we did not see?
Yeah.
I guess the question really that I'm looking at, that I'm trying to answer with this, is how often do we see that sort of trope of Greek action in early modern drama?
Yeah. One thing I would like to have studied more is the Christianity and the religious parts of alchemy, since you were bringing into the episode the religious aspects of grimoire, and I wish that I had spent more time on that. There just wasn't space.
I also like that you said that Christianity piece, because that brought something up to me of, I know that we looked at like this different magic traditions that appear to be depicted in the Tempest versus what we talked about in our Macbeth series with witchcraft. And I think to go further in it is like really being able to compare contrast and also look at like timeline and like where are these happening in time, because a lot of our Macbeth stuff also talked about like the persecution that was happening in Scotland and the religious powers of the time. I would have loved to dive more into that and really scaffold that into the conversation about alchemy and grimoire-based magic.
Yes, and where does James fit into both of these? Because these are James plays. They're Jacobean James plays. So, yeah. Man, there's just so many more branches to...
There's so much more to study.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we really enjoyed revisiting these, I would say. And speaking of revisiting and going back, our next episode will be one of our bonus episodes, which is where we do something that's maybe a little bit out of the norm for the podcast. In the past, we've done like panel discussions, we've had interviews, and this time we're going to be doing something that we have been wanting to go back and do for a minute. So look out for that in 2 weeks. And with that, thank you for listening.
I'm Kourtney Smith.
And I'm Elyse Sharp.
This is Shakespeare Anyone?
Thank you so much for listening to Shakespeare Anyone. Works referenced in this episode are available in the episode description. Our theme music is Neverending Minute by Sounds Like Sander.
If you would like to support us, visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. You can also hit the subscribe button, like us, leave a comment, write a review, share us on social media, tell a friend about us, all the things. We'd appreciate it. For more, you can visit our website, shakespeareanyone.com, or follow us on Instagram at shakespeareanyonepod.
Now, because you listened all the way to the end of the credits, here is a completely random Shakespeare quote for you.
My name is Mike Craniola from Walking Shadow Shakespeare Project. This is from Troilus and Cressida, Act 1, Scene 2. said by Pandarus. That's Hector, that. That, look you. That. There's a fellow. Go thy way, Hector.